Good afternoon. So how did I get so lucky to get you right after lunch? So please, you have to stay awake. And I'm super psyched because I'm in the right place. Personalized learning is exactly the future of education, and I think the future of connecting learning pathways for all of our students. I am just really honored to be here, and I'll tell you why. This is my mom, who died many, many years ago, but my mom got her degree in library science from University of Illinois, right here in Chicago. And she spent her entire career as a teacher librarian. Actually, she started in Wilmington, Delaware, and worked for the public library system there. And then she moved back to Chicago, where she grew up, and became a teacher librarian at Chicago Public Schools for about 32 years. And my mom taught me everything I know about the Dewey Decimal System. And I spent many, many, many hours in libraries with her and fell in love with books. So it's, me being here is an honor to her, and I'm really thankful for this time with you. So I grew up in Chicago, born and bred. I'm a South Sider, White Sox. Both of my parents and my godparents and most of their friends worked in Chicago public schools as educators. And my parents were pretty funny because they pushed me as far away as possible from a career in education, and to encourage me to get an engineering degree from Purdue University. I have an MBA from Northwestern, and had a career in corporate America. And things were going really great until I moved back to Chicago and saw this. This is the Englewood Community. It's a community in our city that makes a lot of national headlines for gun violence and poverty. And this community is really special to me because at one time, both of my grandparents lived in this community. My dad was an assistant principal in Englewood, and I actually went to high school in this community. And when I moved back to Chicago and I just traveled, the communities, just from where I grew up, I was just stunned and heartbroken because I'm like, what happened? Like, was it like this when I was growing up, or was it always like this? And sadly, the answer was a little bit of both. I heard Condoleezza Rice speak here in Chicago last year, and we had a conversation, and she was talking about the challenges that we're facing as a nation. And what she said has stayed with me. This is her quote. "What has held us together is the aspiration, this belief that we can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things." And I'm sure, just like many of you, education in my family was the connection to freedom and opportunity. And for the students who are growing up in Englewood, and far too many students across this country, and far too many students who look like me, that connection has been lost. So that is why I started Leap Innovations. Our purpose is to bring the ideal learning experience to life, igniting the unlimited potential for each and every student. The World Economic Forum shared a report in it that says 65% of our elementary school students will have jobs that don't yet exist. The changes that are happening in our future economy are moving so rapidly. We have got to seriously rethink the learning experience for every student. At LEAP, we believe that this ideal learning experience is or can be brought to life in what we call personalized learning. Now let's just talk about what personalized learning is, because a lot of people think personalized learning is about technology and about cool furniture or rearranging desks, station rotation in school. But at LEAP, this is how we think about it. Personalized learning has to be focused on every single learner, tailoring to their needs. It has to enable agency and ownership of student learning. It has to be competency-based, where students advance on mastery. And it has to connect the learning that happens inside of the school to learning that happens outside of school. We've spent about a year working with the American Institutes of Research, with learning scientists and pedagogy experts, educators, to define 92 teaching and learning practices anchored on research to help educators reimagine and rethink what this means in terms of teaching and learning our students. We believe that when we think about students, especially the ones that we target in Chicago, so we are working in a school district that is about 80% free and reduced lunch. And a lot of our students are coming into school with a lot of stress and anxiety. They face a lot of adversity getting to and from school. We know from learning science that the kind of diversity that a lot of our urban kids are dealing with has an adverse effect on brain development and their capacity to learn. But we also know that relationships and trust can counter those effects. So that's why we believe that learning has to start first with relationship and trust, with a way to tailor learning in a way that meets students where they are, that is connected to their context and in the best way that they learn, and that every single student has their own personalized learning pathway, tailored to their needs, interests, and strengths. And that is what we call learner-focused. We also know that learners are more engaged when they have agency and ownership in their learning experience, when they can co-design learning with their educators, when they can track and understand the progress of their own learning trajectory. We call that learner-led. We also know that learners are more engaged when they show what they know. They love to show what they know in multiple ways. As one learner tells me, I don't have to wait until the rest of the class gets it. I can move on. And for students who need more time, that's okay. We call that learner demonstrated. Lastly, it is critical as we think about this construct of learning to recognize that learning can't happen all in school. Students are much more engaged when they have real-world experiences and they are able to connect relationships and networks in school to relationships and networks outside of school. And that is what we call learner connected, which is where all of you come in. LEAP has worked with nearly 120 schools across the Chicago region. And we have a construct where we have on-ramps for professional development to help educators change their practices based on what we define as personalized learning. We've got a set of schools that we have worked with across our city and the suburban areas to start piloting these new approaches with technology solutions. And we are working with a broad set of schools in partnership with our public school district on redesigning whole school models to do what I just described. But in order to do personalized learning, as adults, we have got to put ourselves in the shoes of each and every student. And I'll talk to you more about how we do that with our educators. It's amazing that when we start with our program, and I'm going to describe kind of how we're doing this in our city right now. A lot of the teacher teams who come to us say, what is this? I'm already differentiating learning for my students. I already know my kids. And so what we do is we have them do something called an empathy walk, where they've got to shadow their students. And every time by and large, they come back after their assignment of shadowing at least 2 students, talking to parents, understanding more about the community in which the students that they're serving. Some come back in tears with a lot of humility, acknowledging the reality that I did not really know my kids. And it is that moment that shifts the paradigm of our educators from, and our principal teams to think about if we were really going to be true and ensure that we are tailoring learning to every single student, what would it need to look like? How would we need to change the processes and structures in our school in order to accommodate every single student as an individual? And that's when the process starts. So teachers and principals are working as a team. We start first, because this is a big sea change, as you can imagine, with 4 to 6 classrooms at a time that are either focused on either math or literacy. And those teams are spending about 6 months with us on this journey to think about how they're going to redesign their the students' learning experience to really do personalized learning. As they are going through this redesign experience with our staff, we are also evaluating education technology solutions. And so, again, we believe technology is an important tool as we think about the new learning experience to help extend school day, to help provide teachers important data, to enable students to have agency around their own learning. But again, it starts first and foremost with tailoring this personalized learning pathway. We have a national curation board of learning scientists and pedagogy experts and investors in ed tech that help us to evaluate solutions all over the world. We've had over 150 apply to come to Chicago to pilot. And the beauty with this actually is that we are giving very constructive feedback to education technology companies on what they need to do better in order to serve and personalize learning for students. So after the 6 months, this culminates into what we call match day. School teams come in with a design. They have real intention on what their problem they're trying to solve in either math or literacy, and they come in very knowledgeable with what they want in an education technology solution to help them in the implementation. So we have something called Match Day, where we take over we have an innovation hub in Chicago called 1871, and now we're taking over both floors. And we have these meetups, and the school teams come in. It is like, it's Match Day, so think of Match.com, but it's about 45-minute dates where they come in and they interview, and they get to demo the solutions. And the school teams get to pick one product that they're going to implement with these new practices. Many of the tech companies are coming, and they're donating, by the way, to our program for free because they believe the intentionality in how we're designing this and we're incorporating and embedding it with the school design is facilitating much stronger adoption, and it enables them to get more proximate to the needs of our students and our educators. So they're getting great feedback as well. So during the school year, the school teams are piloting. They are implementing practices. Most of the school teams are starting on the entry level with either the learner focus, so they're all developing personalized learning pathways for every single student. Also, they're building in some choice and agency for each of the students. And it's really awesome to see. We have 3 continuous improvement cycles during the school year where again, this space around innovation, giving school teams the ability and a safe space to try and fail, and then to regroup and to think about, okay, what's working and what's not working, and then how do we evolve? How do we iterate from there? I want to talk to you about a school team that has done this incredibly well. It's Belmont Cragen Elementary School. and it's located on the northwest side of our city. It's about 80% free and reduced lunch, about 60% English language learners. And the school team started along the journey, as I described, where they shadowed their students. They shadowed their students in school while they were in school. They interviewed parents and had a series of focus groups. They learned that parents were really reticent about getting involved and connected to the school because of their own low education attainment, and many also struggle with speaking English. They walked the community, saw lots of challenges in the community with violence and gangs. And one of the first things that they did is that they created a project for the students to come up with solutions on what they would do to address some of the challenges that they faced along the way. And the students came up with a series of projects. One in particular was creating a bench in a park that wasn't the safest place to play, but it was a bench that they designated and they painted, and as a place that if anyone sat on that bench, it was a signal that I need help. Over the course of this project experience, a shift happened. First of all, the teachers soon realized that the behavior challenges that they were dealing with in school had nothing to do with the school at all. It had everything to do with what the students were grappling and dealing with outside of school. They also helped to shift the paradigm for these students from being victims in their community to being change agents. They also created a parent professional development program. Students at Belmont-Cragin, or the parents at Belmont-Cragin, there are 2 parents in each classroom. And so they're embedded and they're partnered and working with the teachers. And they have a parent professional development day once a week. So this has changed the whole dynamic of their engagement. This was a school that was going to close several years ago. It is now rated a 1+ school, which is the highest rating you can get in Chicago public schools. And what's really extraordinary is that these parents and the community have come together. They just got approval from our mayor to open a school in the nearby park. It was a beautiful park building that was not being utilized because of the challenges I described. But that school is now going to be a community school in the park, and is connecting to various services and partners that are going to come and create a whole child service model for the Belmont-Cragin community. That is the power of if we connect, do a better job of connecting in school and out of school. So we think about Belmont-Cragin and the extraordinary work that they've done in partnering with other schools in our community. This is a picture of the Belmont-Cragin students partnering with another school called Wildwood. Wildwood is actually in a more high net worth community in Chicago. And they are actually training the students at Belmont-Cragin of how to have more agency in leading their student-parent conferences. So these are elementary students that are now leading their conferences with educators, with their teachers, to talk to them about where they missed it, what are things that they need to think about doing differently, partnering with their educators on their goals, and resetting their lesson plans for the next cycle. That is LearnerLed. I want to talk to you a little bit about Emily, who's a student at Belmont-Cragin, who 4 years ago was performing at the bottom quartile in math and literacy. And Emily was a pretty shy student and was just really struggling. But when you talk to the principal at the school and the teachers, and they talk about as they've started this personalized learning pathway process and really unpacking what was going on with Emily, helping her to find her voice, helping her build her confidence. She started by volunteering on the Student Ambassador Program. Fast forward 7 years later, Emily is running the Student Ambassadors Program. She is meeting reading standards and exceeding math standards. This can be done, but we are just scratching the surface. We have a data sharing agreement with Chicago Public Schools, and we know that LEAP students that are participating in this personalized learning program have gained 13 percentile points than the comparison student in literacy. More importantly, we are seeing reduction in suspensions, and students are excited to be in school. As I said, we are still scratching the surface. I just believe that personalized learning really has the opportunity to connect learning in school to learning outside of school. That is the real promise. We know that the average student only spends 15% of their time in school. The bulk of their lives are outside of the walls of the school. Given the demands of the economy, as I had mentioned earlier, we can't pretend anymore that all of the learning that a student needs to access is going to happen within the four walls of a classroom. So as we think about this, what could that look like? How do we better bridge in-school learning and out-of-school learning? And we ask ourselves that question all the time. And I want you guys to help me answer it. I'll talk about MyOn. Is anyone here from Florida, Tampa? How many of you are using MyOn in your libraries, or have you heard of it? All right. So MyOn is a literacy ed tech tool that we have been working with for about 4 years. They actually applied early on to be part of our personalized learning program in Chicago. And imagine Pandora. You guys are familiar with Pandora? The app Pandora, okay. So MyOn is like Pandora for reading. It has about 8,000 selections. And students, it's an elementary school product, is K-8. Students log on, they take a quick assessment based on their they take a quick assessment, and the product asks about their interests and their likes and dislikes. And based on that, they tailor a personalized library for that student. And so MyOn, we actually beta piloted MyOn. This is before we really launched in Chicago. We actually got about 6 schools to work with us to just see if this could even possibly be something that could work. We wanted to get the kinks out. And there was a school on the west side of Chicago, again, another challenged neighborhood, that piloted MyOn for about 12 weeks. And we went to kind of check in, and the principal was like, what has happened? My kids are reading like crazy. They have discovered a love for reading. And so, I'm talking to some of the students, and one of them said that they fell in love with soccer. Well, there aren't a lot of kids on the west side of Chicago playing soccer. But he was able to discover a whole new world because of this tool. So we love MyOn, and they've launched now it's been going on for a couple of years now, in the Hillsborough County School District, which is the 8th largest school district in the country, a partnership program called Read on MyOn with the City of Tampa, the United Way, and the public library system. And they have demonstrably made progress on improving literacy with this program. And that's just an example of the power of what could happen if we connect the dots between in school and out of school. But I think it could be even more strongly connected. You're going to be hearing from Brian Bannon, who is our just extraordinary, phenomenal leader in the Chicago Public Libraries tomorrow. And I'm sure Brian's going to talk to you about a program that he's partnered with the Museum of Science and Industry to address summer slide. I won't spoil the data, but it's pretty darn impressive. And as I was talking to Brian about this project, it's like, they've got a partnership with Chapin Hall at University of Chicago, and I've got a partner, we've got a statistician at University of Chicago. It's like, wow, what if this program that you are linking within the library system over the summer, what if the teachers had that data once the students start school and could leverage that information to further tailor the learning for that student? It seems so simple, but how powerful would that be? This dynamism of what this integration of learning could look like and what it's going to be required to look like in the future, I think the opportunities are pretty limitless. As we think about this and developing kind of the lifelong learning pathways for every single student, it's connecting the entire, I think, learning ecosystem, where if we have perspectives and really understanding the learner's context of where the enrichment opportunities are, how do we connect that? How do we connect remediation opportunities? How do we connect to work and internship opportunities? How do we create accredited learning pathways in and out of school? I think this notion, again, of learning happening in the four walls of a classroom is going to be completely insufficient as we evolve into this new arc and next generation of learning. And I believe the library system is a core part of that. So I need you all to help us think about how to make that a reality. So I would love to open with any questions that you might have.
Hi, Phyllis. I'm interested in knowing what kinds of things LEAP is doing in the area of foreign languages, not just Hispanic bilingual, but there's a lot of other languages real prevalent in the Chicago area. My daughter's a school teacher in the Chicago Public School too, and she works in an international school, and her school is filled with students in a bilingual environment, but none of them are Hispanic. They're every other language but.
Yeah, we've worked with the school. Is this Sullivan by chance? We worked with Sullivan High School on the northwest side. I think they have, they're in the double digits of language diversity within that school. And the principal will tell you, which is exactly why he wanted to participate with us in redesigning their school to personalize and tailor learning. And so we're not working specifically on languages, but the context of understanding every single learner, developing their pathway based on their context is really critical, especially as you think about the learning diversity that many of our schools are facing. That is a huge example. Within a standard Chicago public school, it's about 5 to 6 levels of learning proficiency in one classroom. So when one thinks about, wow, how does one educator, deal with that across 30 kids? This whole inclination around, the creating these tailored pathways for every single learner becomes much more real and much more pertinent. But our before you can teach it, yeah. So our community is, there are pockets of that extreme diversity, I would call it. Most of them are, we're still unfortunately largely segregated. So it's mostly African American or mostly Latino. Now, I will say that we have in our selection, particularly on the ed tech side, have been double-clicking on solutions that work very well with ELL students. That's a big deal. IST Math is one of those solutions on the math side that does a phenomenal job of leveling the playing field for language ELL students.
Hi, do you have any plans to expand your program into social studies, history, American government, especially for the middle school age groups who have to pass the state constitution tests?
Yeah, many of our schools, as they're kind of rethinking the redesign out, and I didn't explain this part. We're combining classes, and we're combining subject areas. So it's more of an integrated learning experience for students. So you'll find the connection point between literacy and social studies. So there's a through line through the experience. We're also finding in these new models that combining classes is a big deal, especially when you think about competency-based progression. So this notion of grade levels are basically going to dissipate because they're somewhat meaningless. If you're really thinking about a competency-based approach, you're assessing students based on what they know, not based on kind of what they got on a standardized test, and what you see, what visibility you get on that once a year. So you're seeing teacher teams collapsing and partnering together across subject areas and across grade bands to support the pathway of learning for every single student. And so we are seeing specific projects. It becomes very real when you think about learner connected, and you're connecting and reinforcing learning experiences that that they are getting reinforced on the literacy side, to social studies, to a project-based opportunity that they can do outside and connecting it back in.
Hi. MyOn allows somebody to get excited about an area of their own interest.
Yes.
But how do you then introduce them to other areas that they aren't necessarily interested in but are important, like financial literacy and critical thinking about the news? Are there tricks and techniques for moving them into those areas?
Yes, and again, this isn't a free-for-all. So students you have to stay on standards. The learning still has to be rigorous, but within that context, you're giving students some choices of topics, some choices of projects, the opportunity to learn in venues or in ways that they best learn. And so you're giving them some freedoms with earned autonomy. And what's fascinating is when you see the shift. This is always the tough part, particularly with educators who are very used to being kind of the sage on the stage and kind of dictating to kids information as if they're these open vessels just waiting to be poured information. It's the shift of trust and letting go, so kids can kind of you're building that muscle for student ownership and real agency. But it is within a context of learning standards that we cannot that we can't miss. But you're enabling some level of choice across a learning module or subject area.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm from Canada, and Quebec specifically, and we keep hearing where we are that they're having problems finding professors. So I'm just wondering how challenging it is to provide personalized learning, how much demanding it is. Do you need more resources to accomplish that? Because that's the first reaction I had. Is that more demanding on the entire school system, or that's not the case at all based on the shift that needs to happen?
I'm sorry, you're saying in terms of costs or resources to do this, or?
Well, cost, but having enough professors. Do you need more professors to accomplish personal learning?
Having educators. It's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion, around that. I think the answer is both and, right? So on one level, as we're seeing teachers not kind of in their individual silos, just by themselves teaching 1 to 30 students, and you're combining classrooms. So you're creating teacher teams and much more an effective collaboration. We're actually seeing that you can support more students much more efficiently. At the same time, we have educators or teaching assistants that are augmenting and supporting. So we have pullouts for students. So students who need additional support can receive that additional support. I think in the future we're going to see very different types of educator roles. I think many of you who are working in the library space and the broader learning ecosystem are going to be educators as well, because the learning is going to be individual to every single student on their pathway. And along that pathway, those learners are going to have to engage with lots of different types of educators in a different context than what we have now. Thank you all very much.